And we're live. Welcome everyone to Children's Book World's virtual launch party for Alison Green Myers, A Bird Will Soar. Welcome Alison and Meera. Alison Green Myers is a writer and educator. She's also the program director of the Highlights Foundation. A Bird Will Soar, this gorgeous novel, is her first novel. She lives in the woods with her family in Pennsylvania. We are joined tonight by Meera Trehan, who will be in conversation with Alison this evening. Meera Trehan is the author of The View from the Very Best House in Town, which releases in February of 2022 from Walker Books, US. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. She lives in Maryland with her family. So with that, I will hand it over to Meera and Alison, and we can hear all about A Bird Will Soar.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
You can get your copies at childrensbookworld.net.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yuri Trahan, and I am the lucky person that gets to help Alison Green Myers launch her amazing debut, A Bird Will Soar. Before Alison and I get to talking, and believe me, we can talk, I want to thank Children's Book World for hosting this event, and Amanda, thank you so much. Bobby Combs for making the arrangements, and to our audience for joining us tonight for this special event. But most of all, I want to thank Alison for inviting me to join her and for writing this book that has touched me so deeply and I know is going to touch so many hearts. I had the good fortune of meeting Alison at the Highlights Foundation. We chatted a little bit by phone about some workshops, but I didn't meet her in person until I was there in August of 2018. At the time, we were both in similar places in our writing careers. Both of us were agented, and both of us had young adult novels on submission that hadn't sold. And both of us were working on our second novels, middle grades with unusual structures that I think we all both had a lot of questions about. We weren't sure if we could write them. We weren't sure if we should write them. We weren't sure what the final form might possibly take. But somehow we did it. It's hard for me to believe that was only 3 years ago. I feel like Alison has been in my life for much longer. And I feel like this book is an instant classic, and it too has been in my life a long time. Tomorrow, the book will officially release, and supply God's willing, you all will have the chance to read it shortly too. And I think you are probably going to feel very much the way I do, that it is like an old friend that you've just known forever. So anyways, that's enough of me talking. I'm so honored and excited to be here with Alison. And now it's time for her to talk. So Alison, let's start at the beginning. And by the beginning, I mean the beginning of the book. Could you read to us just from the very beginning of the book? How does it start off?
Sure. Well, before I read, I definitely need to say thank you, Meera, first of all, for that beautiful introduction. I don't know if I've ever been introduced before, so that was really special and lovely. I have to say, I am overwhelmingly grateful for your support. I love that I can text you and say, can I just call you with all my bad ideas? And you're like, yeah, sure, that sounds great. And then you're here also to help me launch A Bird Will Soar tonight. And I hope that everyone here gets to know Meera's work too. I've had the pleasure of reading her novels. And yes, The View from the Very Best House in Town is already up for pre-order. It is funny and it's imaginative and it's emotional. And she used the word unusual structure, but I would say the thing that I love so much about Meera is that she trusts her readers, and they're going to go wherever she takes them because that's what she puts in place in her stories. So thank you, Meera, for being here. And I echo Meera's words too, to Amanda, thank you, and to Children's Book World, and to Bobby Combs, of course. Thank you for bringing us all together. You are magical too. And to all of you out there, I don't know who's out there, but if you're out there and you're supporting me and to Meera and the book, thank you so much for being here. So I'll take a deep breath And I'll read from the beginning. Just the first page. I actually don't have those beautiful copies yet that Amanda has, but hopefully mine's coming in the mail soon too. The book is called A Bird Will Soar. Chapter 1, Mysteries. The wonder of things, of wings, of sky, of Mother Nature's secrets packed inside scattered seeds. The world is filled with mysteries, clues everywhere, cracked shells, forgotten feathers, deep prints left in soft soil. Axel gathers clues wherever he goes, from the four walls of his bedroom to the rushing creek and deer-spotted trails tucked behind his house. He wanders and wonders. Axel is never truly alone in the woods, even though he feels completely alone in his thoughts there. He brings with him a partner to gather clues. An exceptional partner, really. Ray. Ray, whose nose picks up things Axel's eyes can't see. Ray, whose ears perk to the sounds of songs invisible to Axel. Yes, Ray is an excellent partner for walking in the woods. And best of all, Ray doesn't talk. Doesn't try to interrupt the important observations or thinking time that the woods offer. And the nest, of course. It is a favorite place to stop and gather clues, to listen, to watch, to wait. That's the first page.
Got chills. Every time I read it or hear it, I get chills. It's so beautiful. Could you talk a bit about why you decided to start the story that way and that first line about the world being full of mysteries?
Yeah. Well, you've seen a lot of versions of it, but I would say that was the hardest part for me was finding the right poem, finding the right opening into Axel's world. And I think I've probably written 16,000 poems. I tried them all. I started with Axel introducing himself. I mean, the opening lines for a long time were, "My name is Axel." Of course, the point of view shifted in the book, and so that wasn't quite right. And I started with a poem. The thing I love about where I live, like when I walk out my front door, it is just the diversity of green. There are ferns at every different stage, in their life cycle. I have pine, I have deciduous, that's changing colors before me, So I started with this poem about greens, but that wasn't quite right, And then I think I started to get a little closer. I went back to kind of some of the sparks for the story, which were a poetry about birds. And I started to write about this freedom of flight for an eagle. And that is one poem out of maybe those 16,000 that I kept and actually got placed later in the book. But I still hadn't found the one that, I wanted it to be at the opening. And I think what I kept coming back to, and you and I have talked about this, but like the book is quiet in many ways. And for me, it's the quiet that helps me to figure out mysteries, to help me process, to help me problem solve. If I have quiet, I can pull clues together and kind of go on. And so if the whole book was supposed to be about the way one person processes things in this one mind, in this one world, then I needed to start from that point. I needed to start from mysteries. So I started, the world is filled with mysteries, clues everywhere. And that finally felt like we were opening up into Axel's world. But I think that was pretty much how I got there.
Yeah, I always find beginnings really are too. But what I love about your beginning, is that it opens up into Axel's world, but it also opens up the reader into this book, right? Because like when you start a book, it's a mystery, and yet you're already in that first page giving us so many clues about the world, about who Axel is, about who Ray is, about their relationship. You know, there's so many characters in the book, and the relationships between all of them, between, you know, the brothers and sisters of the older generation, or the, you know, husbands, wives, kids, friends, dogs, they're all so important. And you're just right from the beginning, so much clues about this world and these people. So I think it's a fantastic opening. And
I think when you first started reading it, which was probably around 2018, the opening started, that was about miracles.
yeah.
And that to me, it was that entry point for a long time. And I struggled with that because it wasn't quite right, because that was pulling Bird, the mom, really forward into the world, and it wasn't pulling Axel's world really forward. And, you know, I think there is something really cool about miracles and mystery and magic and science. And, you know, I knew that there was something about all of those pieces kind of churning together in the book. But as I kept going with that draft, what I was finding out, people were seeing a tension between Axel and his mom, that it wasn't what I was trying to say. What I was trying to say wasn't that Axel couldn't respect the way that his mother thought of the world. That's not Axel. Axel would be like, hey, you think in miracles and I think in mysteries, and hey, that's just right because that's how you process things. So for me, bringing Axel front and center and bringing mysteries front and center was an important place to start, because I wanted the world to be shaped around him and his views. So you had miracles at first, but I switched it on you.
But I noticed miracles still make an appearance. They just aren't the first thing that pulls you in. You know, toward the end, there's a beautiful chapter on miracles called Miracles. But well, that's wonderful. Well, as Alison has mentioned, I was one of the lucky people who got to read an early draft of A Bird Will Soar when it was mostly poems. I can very quickly show you, getting out if people can see a poem and my notes. And it just had a dash of prose. I mean, I remember being really fascinated because, you know, usually you read novels in verse, or you read, you know, prose novels, but not a mix of the two. And I remember you even like, can I do this? And I was like, it works for me. Who knows? But I loved it. I was so moved by your characters. I was in awe of your ability to just pick the perfect word for every situation and every emotion. I think I told you that. And then, you know, time passed, book sold, got edited, and one day I was lucky enough to get this in the mail, the ARC advanced reader copy of A Bird Will Soar. And I was thrilled, and I devoured it, and I loved it again. But I remember thinking, wow, this book is really different than the draft I read. First of all, there was a brand new character who was one of my very favorites, Daniel Barrios, a friend for Axel. But it was also suddenly a lot more prose than poetry. I mean, suddenly to me, suddenly to you, but we'll get to that. And also the point of view had shifted. And I thought, wow, these are really different. But then this past week, I was rereading to get ready for this program, and I read them very close together, just like a day apart. And I thought, old me, you're totally wrong. This is like the same book. I mean, yeah, sure, the form is different. The conflict is sharpened, you know, a little bit here and there, but essentially at their core, this is like the exact same book. So Alison, help me sort this out. Who's right, old me or current me? And can you tell us a bit about the revision process too?
Sure, there's a whole lot in there. I would say be kind to past Meera, you know, and current Meera. Like all of you is right. sometimes when I think of the book, I think of it, it's just, I remember the moment that it all went and changed, and I was like, oh, that's what people talk about when they talk about revision. But then I, can still see so much of the book as the same. And you have gotten to see this scatter of my brain waves the way probably only a handful of people who have gotten to see. And the book at that early version was definitely me in process. I had this thing that I really wanted to say. I wanted to, say, I just keep thinking about instincts and I keep wondering about truth and fact. I mean, let's think about where we were. It was, the seed is starting to formulate in 2017, 2018. I wanted to talk about wonder and mysteries and having, this character who really, really loved their life, but still had things that they had to figure out.
Don't we all?
Yeah, right. And I think like it was that, and it was every time I would write it down on the page, then I'd be like, oh, those are words. So that's something. And I'd write a poem about instincts and I'd be like, yeah, but where's the plot? Like, where's the narrative that goes with that? And I really started thinking more about, it's like this constant theme in my life where I'm just constantly thinking about the brain and the mind and how, we're all processing things differently. We're all trying to tune into the voices that help us move forward. Andrew Carr, my editor on the project, like he was telling me the thing that I needed to do, which was the thing that I was writing about. He was like, you just have to trust yourself, trust where you're going with this book, believe in yourself. And here I am creating this book about this character who I'm saying, trust your instincts, trust your wings. You've got this, you can soar. And it was still a struggle for me to figure out how to pull those revisions together. But really, I think having that support and that trust to be able to say, all right, I'm going to crack the book open. I'm going to seek entry points to the book. I'm going to try and figure out how do I add more, even if it all gets tossed out, instead of keeping it to my quiet voice in poetry, which is usually very spare, And I remember my agent, Jen Rofe, she saw one of the versions that somehow you didn't see that version that had Daniel appear, and Daniel appeared once in real time, and then all the other times it was like Axel was just thinking about Daniel, and she was like, no, more Daniel, more imagination, more of them together. This is how we see Axel loving his life. And she was right. And so I had that support. I had you and a handful of really great friends who kept giving me feedback. And then, my editor who was like, just keep trying different structures, keep seeing what fits, just, keep going. And it was really late in the game when he finally said, okay, so now we're going to try for some consistency. You've got chapters that are super long. You've got chapters that are short. You've got poems here. You've got an email there. You've got a fact written on one page. You've got a blank page. And he was like, now let's add some consistency. And he started to look at are we opening with a poem for every chapter, or are we opening every chapter with something poetry adjacent? I remember that phone call where he was like, poetry adjacent. And I'm sitting there like, yeah, that sounds great. I know what poetry is. I know the term adjacent, but I could not figure out what he was talking about. Right. And he had called back later and said, all these bird facts, we'll be on the phone, and he would call if, he and his family saw an eagle or saw a hawk or went, out birding. And So he'd be like, all these facts, we could, put facts in it. And that's poetry adjacent in the way that you interpret that fact or write that fact. So we'll have poems and poetry adjacent. And I don't know, it like wasn't quite there, but it gave me an excuse to like spiral into more bird research, which I really enjoyed doing. But ultimately, like, no matter what I found, it was taking me out of the narrative. So I definitely wanted to have the poems that worked with the narrative. And I understood what he was saying about consistency and having the facts. But I couldn't find the ones that actually made everything move forward. And so I remember writing to him and I said, is it okay to make up a book inside of a book? I think I've seen that done before. I just need you to tell me, and he wrote back and he was like, let's see what happens, which is, great. So I used, like he was saying, all those facts, people that I had talked to. There's a lot of people I love in my life who also love birds. So it could take that, books that I had read. And I created a text called A.P. Brown's Collection of North American Birds.
Which I almost Googled because I was like, I think it's...
The copy editor Googled it and they were like, really... is this the correct name for this book? I can't find it. And so that I was like, actually, Andrew said it was okay to make it up. But, I wanted to be able to, like, if I knew in the narrative I needed a fact about birds dreaming in song, I wanted to be able to place that in a book and use that fact. And so I could do that in A.P. Brown's Collection of North American Birds because I placed that fact in there. Or there's a section where I talk about protective covering that some birds have to help block out sound and open it when you want to hear just very specific sounds, right? And it leads into a part in the narrative where we're talking about closing some things out so that you can really focus on one thing. So I covered that with A.P. Brown's, and I'll tell everyone here a secret. I hope they're here. I don't actually know if they're here, but I hope they're here.
They're here. We're trusting them here.
AP stands for Anna and Parker Brown, two of my absolute favorite humans and favorite children on earth. And now they get to be a part of Axel's world forever because they are the said A.P. Brown collection in the book. So I don't know. That's a pretty roundabout way of me saying I pulled from everywhere and the revision process kind of ended up setting up that structure.
But I know we'll talk more about this, but I think, this book, one thing I do love about this book is how interesting the structure is. But I think when I don't say breaking the rules because that might be too strong, but when you're not necessarily telling a story the way the majority of the stories are told, it seems like you almost have to do that by instinct to some degree, because it's going to be a little bit more trial and error. And I actually, now that I say that, I almost don't like the word error. It's almost like it's going to evolve. You're going to have to try things, and there are going to be things, right, that are like absolutely essential to your process. But then you're also in the end going to have to say, I love this, but it doesn't move the narrative forward. Like now it's about the story and I have to focus on the story.
Yeah. And I think, you bring up a good point there too about instincts. And that is like the backbone of the entire book. And I can see in the comments a few beloved classroom teachers here. So you'll get this when I say it. But I come from the classroom that like that to me is what matters most with this book. Like I want to just talk to kids about the book. And so maybe I'm not supposed to do this when I'm writing, but I kept thinking about kids and how they could interact with the book. And so, it was on purpose. And maybe it was like teacher instinct or something. I'm not sure, but I wanted to make sure that there were lots of ways to enter this book, like if a kid picks it up and they're like, that doesn't look like, I'm not sure, they could go in and find a really cool fact in there. They could flip to one of the pages that has factual information. they might flip to a poem that's in there, a passage where, the tree, like high action, where the tree bursts into the house. They might, get the jokes between Dr. Martin and Axel when they're emailing back and forth. And those might be the story to them because those are the entry points that they go to. Some kids might read it from beginning to end. And some kids might just sample different parts of it. My favorite, thing I think about being a student and then also being a teacher was the read aloud. And so I would say, for some kids, the sampling is only going to come after some beloved teacher or adult reads some of the words aloud. I hope that, some people are directed to the audiobook because I was lucky enough to get Jamie K. Brown as the narrator, and he completely nails it. It is absolutely remarkable to hear his voice. He takes the reader by the hand and he's like, let's go together into Axel's world. It's a cool place. We're going to go, And for me, just thinking of the ways that kids can interact with the book, like you said, I don't know, people have said to you and I, Meera, about the structures being unusual. I think it was like, I just want people to be able to access it the way that they need to access it. And that's the story to them. The story to me was from beginning to end. And yes, I wanted to plot these pieces out and make sure that the dream sequence, is here with this dream fact that starts it off. But if a kid only reads those factual points and that's what they take away from the book, to me, that's amazing too, that they have lots of ways to bring it into their world.
I love that sentiment. And I actually think a lot of children who are reluctant readers would probably be much happier reading if they knew they didn't for a child who might have a learning disability or otherwise, or just knowing there's not just one right way to read a book, and whatever you get out of it and whatever speaks to you is wonderful and is a gift. And that's what, reading and books are about. I think you must have been a wonderful teacher. I told Alison yesterday, I was like, why can't you be my children's teacher? But anyway, but we're talking about the reader, but I want to talk a little bit about you, because you're also talking about where you live and people you love. And this is obviously a very personal book. So what does it feel like as a private person to have a part of who you are and your world revealed through this book?
Yeah. So we've talked about this. This is not a surprise to me that you're asking this question, because that was along with sharing bad ideas with Meera, I would be like, I don't know if I can do this. This seems like I'm going to open the front door and people are pretty much just walking around inside my brain and inside my house. And how do people do this? But they do. It's strange. I have a pretty public facing job. I did theater and band in high school. I taught in classrooms. I lectured at conventions. I was the reigning bingo caller at Reidenbaugh Elementary School's bingo night. I called games on a carnival, on a traveling carnival, that. There are out there Alison moments, but for me and for the people who really know me, they know that that's performance Alison. They know that that's, I say, I'm going to be the bingo caller tonight, and I'm going to, do that. And I'm going to do it the best way that I can, and make it as much fun as possible. But those things scare me. Tonight scares me. Amanda was like, if you get really nervous, which was so thoughtful of her, you said, me, Meera, and you were like, if you get really nervous, it's okay to say this and that. But I also think, and this is a line that's in the book, I think that you can enjoy things that scare you. Performance and public speaking can scare me, but I can enjoy it. I might not use the word joy leading up to the moment, but when I'm there and I'm talking about the thing that I'm passionate about, that is joy. And I think oh, like there it is. Like the world is truly a mystery. You can hold fearful things and enjoyable things, in the same hand. And even if it makes your insides tremble. So I think like for me, this book is like the ultimate insides trembling, but now everybody has to see that on the outside. And I mentioned this before, but like I ultimately think I'll calm down about it when I'm doing that thing that I love, which is when I get to talk to kids. Bobby, I think, is here tonight. And one of the pieces of advice that she gave me was, it's okay if you want to write your teacher guide. Like, it's okay if that is the thing, that's your comfort area. And if you want to go into your teacher guide and write that, because that's where you feel comfortable, and think about all the ways that you want to talk to kids about this book, all the poetry activities you want to do with them, the STEM activities you want to do with them, the art projects, and then you can go back to the other promotional things that maybe aren't in your comfort zone, but you can do that. So yeah, I think here we are, the book is coming out, and it is what it is. But I think having the joy of getting to talk to kids about it, to say, hey, this is what I really think about instincts. What do you think? That's what's going to make it feel more comfortable, even if right now this whole part feels a little public-y and uncomfortable and out there. So, yeah.
I mean, do you want to talk at all about like parts that were sort of based on your own life or own experience? I mean, we've chatted a bit about this and about how I hate this question, even though I am asking it right now, because I think often for people, especially who don't write, it tends to be really oversimplified. Like, oh, so there's a bird. So did you have an eagle in a barn growing up? Or, oh, is your person at Delaware Valley Raptor, like, are they named Taylor? Like it seems like a really direct line. And often in the process of fiction, it's much, much more, it's a spider web, and it's, and it changes and it morphs until it becomes something unrecognizable. But at the same time, I think what motivates writers to write are things that they feel deeply in their own life often. And so it's not like you can fully separate yourself or your worldview from the book. Or as I was talking to you now, if I'm like, or a mundane details, like I'm like, I need to describe a glass. Okay, here's a glass. Okay, it's a jam jar, because that's just easier than me making up a glass from scratch. But so, where do those points of your own life intersect, and how?
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. Like, there are definitely everyday, like mundane things in the book. I was talking to a good friend last week, and she said something to her son, who is friends with my son, and said, they call me Miss Allison because I was their teacher, and Miss Allison has a book coming out, and it's about birds, and it's about imagination and nature. And the child said, do you think I'm in it? And she said, I actually do. I think like each of us is in this book. And that is so true. Like, the heart of the story has always been Axel. And there are points when I was writing that Axel was 100% my son. And then he was me. And then, he was children that I know. And then all of a sudden, like, Axel became his own character. I can point to things where Axel and I intersect, and where he and my son intersect. And, you've shared with me moments where it resonated with you. Like, I can find those moments, but now Axel is on his own. There's another, it's not a main character, but one of the characters I love so much in the book, his name is Emmett. And he definitely comes from dear friends. Originally, when I pictured Emmett, I'm so glad that I see that he's on the call tonight. He's my friend Tom. He was my friend Tom through and through. And I thought, if I wanted to give this child, Axel, who's going through something, just this pure of heart, wonderful human, I'm going to put Tom with him. He'll be okay if Tom is with him. And then, you know, Emmett started to take on other pieces. And I think, Andrew, you know, we were having, he phone calls a lot. I know I said the phone call, but he called once when he and his family were on vacation, and he was like, I just drove past this little tiny grocery store in this little tiny town, and it made me think of Emmett. And at that point, like, Emmett was very much like a little bit my sister-in-law, a little bit of Tom, a little bit of this woman, Carol, who really took care of me a lot when I was younger. Like, so it was, you know, these different people kind of being pulled together. My friend Laura, who loves to cook so much. And then Andrew says this thing while he's on vacation. And he's like, I just think we have to figure out, like, Emmett and George, they've left the city, but Emmett loves great food. And when you live in a little town like that, is there a grocery store? Can you get high quality food? I just need to know. And that was it. Then he was done with the phone call. That was, you know, that was it. But it was like, oh my gosh, he's already at the point where Emmett is a character. For me, it would be like, I don't know, maybe I should call Tom and see what he would do if he lived in a small town and wanted to get, you know, specialty food or something like that. But what he was asking was like prompting me to say, okay, pack up that Emmett and let's take Emmett into his full shape and make him into a character. Leave that Emmett who you love behind and is influenced by all of those people. He's still, you know, Axel's going to be safe in the care of Emmett, and make him into the character that he needs in order to stay in the book. Like, if you want to keep him in the book, we've got to have a reason for him to stay. And I, you know, had the opportunity then to do that for all of the adults. I got to write about them before Axel was born. I got to write about them, the way that they would fight, you know, in when they were young. I got to write a scene about Emmett and George meeting in an elevator in New York City and bonding over a Mary Oliver book.
I want to see
like,
that one.
That'll never make it into A Bird Will Soar. It's not a book about a meet cute between Emmett and George, you know, but that I had that. I could put Emmett in the car and have the reason that Emmett is the one who drives him to the raptor sanctuary, because, you know, the very best grocer is in that town too. So all of those things, I think, like, yes, the book has so many parts of me and all of these people that I've been lucky enough to collect and love over, you know, decades. But these characters then suddenly started to be their own people, their own humans, and the world started to be its own place too. I think beautiful. Editing as well. That is, sorry, I'm not being very concise. I need an editor.
No,
you know, that's what it was.
But we have talked about humans, which is wonderful. But now a book, A Bird Will Soar, where birds permeate this book thematically and otherwise. Let's talk birds. And I want the audience to help us out here too. So my question for Alison is, what is your favorite bird? And what is your favorite bird fact? But before you start, I also want to invite the audience to put into comments what their favorite bird and or bird facts are.
Yes, birds. Yes, birds.
And don't worry, you will have more bird facts after you read this book. But so if you just want to say bird, that's fine too. But birds, let's do it.
Birds.
Yes, Bobby, bird.
Let's go.
Okay, Alison.
Good. Bobby did see a hawk tonight. Yes. So I'll start by saying my son really loves birds. And maybe when he was three, like maybe four, maybe 3 and 4, one of his favorite things to do was to find people's favorites. That's what he liked to do. Regardless of what the subject matter was, he wanted to know your favorite things in it. And so one of the things was birds, because he really loved birds. He assumed, well, everybody must really love birds. And so he just needed to know what your favorite bird was. So the dedication of the book actually says, you know, to Will, who knows which birds to favorite, because he so desperately wanted me to favorite roadrunners due to my epic fear of snakes. He was like, logically, 3-year-old son to his 40-year-old mother, like, logically, you need to have a roadrunner be your favorite bird because it will, in fact, kill the snakes that you're so afraid of. But he could recall then, like, what people's favorite birds were. And you could tell he was thinking about that person when he would see the birds then. And I love that so much. It's like we're looking at this instant, symbol of this person that we love. And I remember when he found out that his dad's favorite bird was a red-tailed hawk, and we just couldn't really go anywhere without him being like, Dad, there's one. Dad, there's one. And then if you live in northeastern Pennsylvania like I do, and you hop on a highway and you start going, red-tailed hawks are opportunists. They're going to sit up there and they're going to look in the median for as many things as they can get their tasty mitts on. And so we would go like to the grocery store. We would have to leave our town to go to the grocery store. And it was like red-tailed hawk, red-tailed hawk, red-tailed hawk, red-tailed hawk. But anyway, I'm not answering your question, but I am giving time for people to populate the
I know, and I'm loving
birds in there. I will say, even though it's not the rules of favorite, that's okay. My favorite bird actually changes based on what's going on in my backyard. We had an American kestrel in our woods this summer. And so I know that my beloved Highlights Foundation family, my coworkers, are on this call right now. And the whole summer had to deal with me when we're on a Zoom call, looking up and being like, there's the kestrel, there's the kestrel. They're done with me talking about the kestrel, but it's a magnificent bird. It's stunning and it's rare to see, and I love them. But last year, the barred owl was my favorite bird because we had so many in our woods last year, and when they call to each other, they sound like kazoos. And I mean, I just, all I wanted to do was make it nighttime just so I could hear the barred owls. So my favorite bird changes based on what's happening in my neck of the woods. What about you, Meera? What's your favorite bird?
Mine also changes, but I did think of one for like, what is my favorite right now? And I think penguins, but not for the reason everyone thinks. The reason I like penguins so much is, yes, they're cute and they're great parents, and they are in the Arctic. And of course, there's the movie Penguins in Madagascar, which I highly recommend. But seriously, the real reason penguins are my favorite is because when we look at them, we think like, oh, they're kind of these cute, awkward creatures, on the ice. But actually in the water, they're elegant, they're fierce, they're hunters, they can dive, and I think penguins are a good reminder that you can look at a creature or a person and think you know what you're seeing, but you don't really understand them until you see them in their element. So I was thinking penguins.
I love the answers in here too. I see so many. Pam Courtney. Listen, I adore you, Pamela Courtney, and you talked about the Cardinals and the Blue Jays duking it out. Man, we have Blue Jays this summer, like you would not believe, and they get into it, and then they talk to each other, and they're angry with each other, but they're so beautiful. And I think, my goodness, how could they just fight all the time, but they're gorgeous while they're fighting. So I can imagine what it was like with a Cardinal and a Blue Jay. I am going to just take this down a totally different road if we start talking about facts about all of the birds that people are listing in here. So I'll probably stop looking in the chat because I'll want to talk about every single one of them. Very exciting.
That's amazing. So we are getting a little short on time. So very quickly, we've talked about a lot of themes in this book, including instincts, birds, but truth, mysteries, inside and outside. Also, we haven't talked about processing and clarifying. And when I read this book, you circle back to these themes, and you'd see it both in poetry and in prose. And I'm wondering, can you talk about how that helped you, and maybe even read a little to sort of show us that the thematic interplay between poetry and prose?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I'll read a little, and I'll show that. I'll read a little beyond where we were reading before in the beginning, and then I'll read a little bit of prose, and then I'll read a little bit of poetry. You heard on the opening page this. So imagine we saw Axel and Ray at the nest just before they're at the nest, and then they get to do some observations there. And so now we're coming towards the end of this chapter, and they're coming out of the woods together. Axel doesn't race to his mom the way Ray races to one of his favorite people. It's okay to love someone so much. All you need to do is think of them, not cover them in sloppy kisses the way the old pointer likes to cover the man who rescued him as a pup. Ray's up on his hind legs, one brown paw on each of George's shoulders, placing stinky dog breath licks onto George's white beard. George doesn't correct him for jumping. Maybe because he knows Ray won't listen. Or maybe because this is one of George's favorite parts of the day. The time when Axel and Ray first come from the woods. When Axel and Ray come home. If you have ever gone into the woods with me, George begins. These are words from one of George's poems. Actually, not a poem he wrote, just a poem he's gathered. A fact about George: he loves to repeat poems. He loves to gather words the way Axel loves to gather clues, the way Ray loves to chase squirrels, the way Bird loves her flowers, and Emmett loves his fancy foods. George says, you repeat the words so that the poem sticks. George says that way you always have the poem in your heart. But for Axel, hearing those words, George's words, is like comfort on repeat. He knows that George will show up when he and Ray cross from the woods to the clearing. He knows that George will say, if you have ever gone into the woods with me. He knows that Ray will cover George in kisses. He knows this because it isn't a mystery at all. It is the comfort of George. George knows the best poems like this one about thinking time in the woods, and others too. Like the one about the golden eagle soaring above the mountains in the morning. Axel likes to imagine peeking underneath George's white hair, underneath the flesh and bone, and into the pulsing brain of George M. Flores. How those words must snap along the synapses. Go, repeat, words. We all have brains. The paths they make are as unique as feathers. Try to match any two. Look up close, really closely. No two feathers are the same, and neither are two brains. And so then later in the narrative, we'll see that parallel. Here's a chapter starter, a poetry. It's called Plan. The compact brain, tight inside curved skull, light enough for flight, packs motor and senses, reason and purpose, and promise. So you can hear, from that sample that one, the plan is like an ode to the magic of a bird's brain, right? Like we use that term and we shouldn't call people, well, we could if we're complimenting them, like a bird brain, like it's magnificent. So much is packed into that curved skull. But we forget that the same is true for us. You and me and Axel and George, our minds might all be different, but the way that we're processing the world, as different as it could be, that's the miracle, right? That's the magic. And that blows me away. And so, I think the best we can do is just make space for people to process the world as they need to. Let us navigate uniquely, follow our instincts, trust, our wings, and really open ourselves up to it. to new experiences like this, tonight. Try and find joy in that, in hard times too. So I love that Axel gets to do that in this book. I love that all the characters get to do that. They get to be their unique self. They get to process the world the way that they feel is the right way. And you see the tension, the way his mother is processing the world is very different from the way that he is. Neither of them are necessarily wrong, but they have to find a way to come together, to grow as a family. I think, I was lucky enough to get to process what was happening in my own mind too when I was writing it.
That's beautiful. We only have about 10 minutes left, so I want to open it up to audience questions, but I'm going to kick us off with my own audience question because I feel like I would be remiss in my duties if I did not ask you about pasta paloozas, which feature prominently in this book. Please tell us all about pasta paloozas.
Pasta paloozas. That was a really funny back and forth conversation. I mean, the things that you get to talk about when you write books for children too, it's like being really serious about a palooza. And it was like, how many comments could go back and forth using the term palooza. It was fun. I can close my eyes and picture the ones that take place in the book. For those of you who haven't read the book, the pasta palooza is a weekly meal with all kinds of pasta. There is something there for everyone. And there is trivia at the pasta palooza too. For me, I think a lot happens when you bring people around a table, when you think about their needs and you care for them with food. When I was younger, I mentioned this, I had a family that just swept me under their wings and right into their world. They were the Pastusecs, and they had this small traveling carnival, and I got to spend summers with them on the road. And they would have these big pasta meals, and they would bring everyone together, people from on the road, people who just needed a meal that day, and they would just gather and all eat together. So like that was like an ode to them, and really like my family, we relocated to this area, and so there was this time in my adult life when I was like, how do you set down roots, and how do you start in a new place? And bringing people around our dining room table helped to build my family here. I think that, eating together and coming to the same table has the power to do that. So I liked the name Palooza, and so that's where that came from. I'm a sucker for a good Palooza.
I'm a sucker for good pasta. So.
So who doesn't love pasta and a Palooza? And that's where they came from. But
excellent. Yeah. Well, we have a question. Beth Manius asks, I'd love to hear some tips on how you would use this book in the classroom.
Yeah, so thank you. Great question. That was something that really excited me, especially trying to think a little bit about promotion was difficult, but thinking about writing an educator guide was really exciting. There's lots of questions that I have. I think it's a good book for discussions. One of them that I would, love to ask kids about is like, who in the book would you like to spend more time with? What would, why? Because I think hopefully the characters are very interesting to them as they pop off the page. There's an activity that I have. One of the art activities is my classrooms were often very messy until they became something. We were constantly in a state of projects. And I'd love to do a study on wingspans and have kids make their own like measured out wingspans and wings and be able to collage or, draw on one side and then on the other side, fill it with those phrases that let them trust their wings. You are a great reader. You can dance, you are a great sister, like whatever those phrases are. So, that would be something I would love to do. But If you're interested in the teacher guide, it's on my website, and that's AlisonGreenMyers.com.
And one question that is answered in the chat, but I just want to say it out loud for everyone, if anyone's not looking at the chat, where can we get signed copies of your book? And the answer is from Children's Book World, and there is a link in the chat to that, or you can go through their website if you do so afterwards, but they will have it. There's also a motion to make Pasta Palooza a Highlights Foundation workshop feature. Alison?
Okay, well, we'll see what we can do about that. Let's talk to Chef Amanda.
And Minty also has a question. Can you tell us about your next book and when it comes out?
Okay. Hi, Mindy. Yes, so I don't know part 2. I'm not quite sure when it comes out. Right now, it's scheduled for October 2022 release, but who knows about that. It's a book. I was talking a little bit about the family that I traveled with on the carnival. It was kind of like, what if the family decided to stay with their small carnival setup and open a little hometown amusement park. And the amusement park in the story is right across a creek from a family campground. And so it's all about these family experiences. And the character in the middle, Riley, she's dealing with the loss of her grandfather and trying to honor him, but also feeling pulled between kind of the bright lights of this amusement park and the fire, the fireside with family at this campground. It's like a bright and busy life and a much more quiet life. And she's trying to see where she fits. I think a big theme of the book is how we, and I'll say me, because it's definitely what I was trying to process, work so hard to cultivate happiness outside of us. Think about like an amusement park. That's the ultimate thing, right? It's like all this happiness, this happy experience outside of you. But how do you find the true happiness and joy inside of you that makes that all worthwhile?
Cannot wait for that. And I think maybe we have one last question because I know we have to wrap up soon. What are you most proud of, or what's your biggest milestone in your journey with this book? Nermeen asked that.
Oh, good question. Hi, Narmeen. Proudest moment, biggest milestone. I'm going to go ahead with, tonight, talking about it and getting it out there and, speaking about it seems like a pretty epic time. This tonight was something that every point I think I got to in the book, every turn, I didn't think it was going to happen. I didn't think an agent would pick it up. I didn't think it would sell to an editor. I didn't think I had it in me to do the revision I needed to do. And so tonight, but then the second I see it in a kid's hand, the second I get to ask a kid, so what do you think of Instincts? That's going to be the moment that, I cannot wait for that moment. I think that'll be the ultimate biggest, milestone. That'll be the best thing. Thank you. Good question. Yeah. Do we want to invite Amanda back and see if she'd like to help us with the raffle?
Yeah. So, okay. I put some numbers next to names who asked some questions, and I put it into a little number generator while you were answering your questions so thoughtfully. And I got Mindy as the winner. So Mindy, Allison has generously decided to give this prize out of a Children's Book World gift card and a copy of the book. So we will be in touch. I will contact you through the Children's Book World Facebook page, and you'll get a beautiful copy of this. We were really mesmerized by the forest green color of the inside. Look at that.
Yay, Mindy, congratulations.
Wow. So exciting. Allison, it's so amazing to hear about your process and where all of these characters came from. What a magical book. It's filled with so much thought and wonder. Thank you for sharing this with us tonight. And again, you can order your copies through Children's Book World's website. I commented our link in there. You can visit our website. But unfortunately, I saw someone commented that you cannot get shipping to Canada. We don't ship internationally. However, support your local bookstore, and maybe Allison can mail you a book plate.
Oh, you know, Narmeen, I'll be signing that book for you the moment that I see you. Thank you for being here. So I definitely want to say just, you know, a heartfelt thank you. There's, you won't remember it. I don't think the words stick in your head the way they do mine, but George repeats several times when Axel and Ray cross out of the woods. He says, if you ever have gone into the woods with me. And that's a quote from a Mary Oliver poem. And it ends, I must love you very much. It's from How I Go Into the Woods. And so Meera, we've gone into the woods together because I love you very much. And I really couldn't have done this tonight without you. So thank you. And thank you all, everyone who's come out for being quietly by my side to celebrate with me when I definitely didn't think that I could celebrate all the questions that came up. So I would like to go into the woods with you all. I hope you'll go into the woods with Axel, and I love you all very much. Amanda, thank you so much. And thanks to Children's Book World. And thank you again to Bobby Combs for making tonight happen. So,
round of applause.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you, Allison, for giving us the gift of this book.
Thank you, Allison. What a wonderful evening to Allison and and Meera's friendship and to this wonderful book and to hearing more from Allison and from Meera in 2022.
That's right. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.